Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for joining me. Today, I wanted to talk about some of the benefits and risks that we might see with sending our manufacturing overseas. To begin with, we're going to look at some of the risks that might be involved working with China. First of all, China is no longer one of the cheapest markets in Asia as far as labor is concerned. Um, So at some point, I think we will need to look beyond China, possibly into Vietnam. But let's first double check with the risks that are involved in China. There's a shortage of qualified workers in China, and so as a result of that, this has led to an increase in wages. In some cases, wages have increased up to 10% in China since 2012, and it appears that they're only going to increase more as China has changed their policy regarding one child per family. That policy has changed, so it is predicted that in the future wages will increase more and it will be harder to find qualified workers due to the fact there will be many more people in China. Another clear risk in China is while they have made some progress, there is still the great potential for theft of intellectual property in China. This has been a problem for a while, and while some strides have been made in making changes to that, there is still problems with intellectual property theft in China. And that's a huge risk for anyone coming into China. Another problem with China is it used to be there were huge tax incentives to come to China. If you were a Western company coming into China, you got huge tax incentives and tax deductions. And now this is no longer available. These tax incentives have disappeared for Western countries coming in looking to manufacture in China. So those are essentially a few of the risks associated with working in China or manufacturing in China. So let's turn it around and take a look at if we were to move manufacturing to Vietnam. There are actually quite a few benefits to moving manufacturing to Vietnam, and in some cases, Vietnam is almost taking over where China was 10 years ago. So to begin with, Vietnam has a very, very eager workforce. They may not be extremely experienced, but they are very eager to get to work. Vietnam is experiencing a huge influx of foreign domestic investments with a total of 10 and $11 billion annually for over the last 5 years. This is up from virtually zero at least a decade ago. There were no foreign investors at least a decade ago coming into Vietnam. This huge influx of investment can be due to the abundant labor pool and the closeness of global supply chains in Vietnam. Another huge bonus to working in Vietnam rather than in China is the fact that workers can make up to half to a third less money than we would spend in China. So whereas someone in China who makes $300 a month, someone in Vietnam would make almost 150, so almost half of what they would make in China. And that is going by the average worker in China. So the average worker in China could make up to $300 a month. It's also easier to get access to the right people in Vietnam if you need to set up meetings for your company or sit down with locals or people who are in charge. It's a lot easier. You have much more access to these people in Vietnam than you do in China. So that's a benefit when you're trying to deal with setting up your manufacturing and dealing with the local government. There is, however, quite the risk in Vietnam as far as most of the workers are unskilled. They don't even have the basic workforce readiness. So a lot of companies that want to set up manufacturing plants in Vietnam have the added expense of setting up training for these individuals. And so as a result of that, Vietnam has set up tax incentives for foreign companies to come in because there is going to be a large cost associated with trying to train this workforce. So in the long run, I think as opposed to China, Vietnam would be a better option for us to set up our manufacturing plant once we train the local workforce and teach them how we do things here with our company. We would be much better off, I believe, moving our manufacturing into Vietnam. Thank you. I hope I shed some light on moving our manufacturing plant overseas, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.